Rawr.
Sound is off, talk crap.
How about now? How are we looking?
Core is off to the side on the stream.
Excellent. You guys can hear me. I'll fix Core in just a moment. Hi, Core. You're off to the side of the screen. Sorry.
Hi, hello. Sorry about that. I had something come up, but I'm here now.
It's totally fine. Welcome.
I was really low.
I was telling the chat that I'm tiny. Oh my goodness. Well. Oh well.
Well, that's put in chat for all to see.
We're super professional at Lorelines.
I had nothing to do with all of this.
Hey, there we go.
Came for the cookies.
Can't believe you're actually American. You actually are more like Spanish. Every single week is something goes wrong. Like here.
It's pretty ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know. Like I have my OBS slider at green to yellow, which is where I should be. But now I'm sliding myself up. Am I incredibly loud now?
Chat says.
Chat.
The audience participation part of Lorelines, where you tell us if our
Hooray.
voice is good.
Blink
or too
twice
loud.
if you're dead.
That's so funny. All right. Well, sorry for the trouble, everyone. Welcome to Lorelines, episode 16. Today we're discussing the 13th Shard, quest lines that span from Heavensward into Shadowbringers, and into the post-leveling 4 roles follow-on quests. So it's all very exciting, and not exactly sure where we're starting precisely today, but we love the 13th, and World of Darkness is a really fun raid, etc. So anyway, welcome to the party.
Hi, guys. So we totally didn't have a topic ready till like maybe probably 2 days ago, and it just came into discussion. Like, what if we just did the 13th? And it's like that's a really good topic.
1 day ago, Ayumi, because we failed to remind you that we should actually put up a poll in Twitter.
Sorry, I run on JST.
No, it was our fault too.
Admittedly, I like any excuse to talk about Sayela, so this is perfect.
Yeah.
But it wasn't exactly a difficult decision because the Void is much like Allig in that it's one of those things that's sort of always been there in the world, post-Sundering to the modern perception, and it has a big effect on a lot of different things.
Extremely big effect.
Yeah, with the announcement of the Reaper job, it's kind of fitting that we're going to talk about the Void.
And that's something I'm curious about, like, why are we pulling Void Scent out when we've done nothing but kill them these past, I don't know, however many years we've been in this time bubble.
Kapalaka, I recommend you complete the Eden raids. They tell you all about that, and they're very fun. We actually might get to that today.
Oh, she's done that.
She was asking, is that where Gaia is from?
Oh, you mean like where Gaia is from in terms of the shards?
Yeah, I know she said she was from Yulemore, but it was never really clarified if she was actually from there or if she was a transplant, like definitively.
In the end of the Eden raids, there's this guy, the Ori guy, who tells that they found the documents of her true identity and her parents' identity in Yulemore, and it's when Gaia says, "I prefer not to look at that," because she decided to embrace her identity as Gaia. But as far as we know, she was actually born in the first.
I guess my concern there would be the original shard of Logriff that this Gaia is descended from. Like, where is that person from? Is that person from the first? Was that person descended from the first? Or are they from some other shard?
Right.
And is she just sort of like reborn on the first because that's where she happened to be when she was killed again?
I have
I
a
think that's
guess
the case.
about that. Given that at after the Innocence fight, Emmett Sulk says, originally he'd entrusted this shard to his comrade Logrif. My assumption would be that Logrif was a first native, was raised up, tried to rejoin it, and then was sent back to rebirth when they fought Ardbert and company. Obviously, that's just a guess, but
I think there's enough evidence to accept that as like 90% chance probability.
Yeah, and at this point, they probably never totally clarify it, not unless we get more from Gaia herself.
Which
Oh
I'm
my
excited
goodness,
to
I
see if we do get more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certain that
Yeah.
we will, because of the follow-on quests, where it's very apparent from bringing certain people from one shard to another that that's possible in their story making. So I can't imagine them letting Reen and Gaia fall flat, given their plot importance for the backdrop of the story.
What I would be frustrated to learn, though, is later down the line, they get time skip appearances and we don't.
I highly doubt that would happen, but that would be awesome.
Oh, look, Green has a late teen, early adult, appearance now. So does Gaia. We still look the exact same way we do 10 years ago.
Hey,
Are
we
you-
got
Yeah.
canon cutscenes.
We
I
are
think
the
if that
execution
happened,
of
and
Final
they-
Fantasy.
I think if that happened and they got an age up and Alphino and Alisaie didn't, the fan base would riot.
Yeah.
fortunately,
Don't worry,
time travel differently between shards in the source.
Don't worry. That's what the HD CGI cutscenes are for. They totally changed their outfits. That's why they're older. And
But
wink,
anyway.
wink, nudge.
I would suggest we start at the beginning of the void, its creation.
Yes, I
Yes.
agree. So with the Sundering 12,000 years ago and the 13th.
So
Shard is
the
the first to be
Encyclopedia
rejoined.
Eorzea doesn't really have a full comprehensive overview of the 13th. It has an overview of the Ascian who started it, Igiorum, but it's only a very brief entry. It's brought into more in-game than it is out of game. So I'll go ahead and let Cobron take it from here since he's the most excited about this.
So Igiorum was assigned to the 13th. This is when all the Ascians were assigned one per shard. And she was very, very somewhere between ignorant and excited and very, very rash about how she went about destabilizing the 13th. So what she did was she introduced a lot of the Warriors of Light on the 13th to White Orosite, or I believe it was just Orosite, in order to combat the Primals, which I'm sure she was the one having those spring up all over the place. And what happened was the Warriors of Light actually wound up being corrupted by the primal ether, trapped in that Orosite, and that's what wound up tipping the elemental balance on the 13th.
They basically became too powerful too quickly without any real way of limiting them. It
Yep.
seems like they were, and additionally to that, the Ascians themselves were pretty new to this whole thing. It still seemed like Emmett was basically like, we were still hasty and ignorant as to the process of rejoinings at that time.
Right.
And so we kind of rush headlong into a situation where Igiorum especially was really excited to do good and rejoin the shards, and they fucked up basically.
Yeah. One thing I do want to point out is that when we heard the live letter or the FanFest keynote at Tokyo, I believe, before Shadowbringers came out, Yoshi P said that the Sundering happened 12,000 years ago, but earlier, back in Stormblood, early Stormblood, late Heavensward, someone asked Koji Fox how old Unkauhai was, and he said between 16,000 and 20,000 years old. So there we're definitely seeing that time dilation, because Mhach couldn't have existed before the Sundering in his current iteration. So we see some evidence here of an extremely advanced time dilation in regards to the 13th, where they probably had a very, very advanced culture before even the first astral era on the source.
It
Good
explains
point.
the massive structures and the classical columns we see in the World of Darkness raid. It's not just a
Not
building,
just. Yeah, I mean, it's not just that, because, I mean, if there were, let's say, an advanced civilization, mostly for the most part, the shards are mostly aligned with one of the Final Fantasy titles prior to 14, and with the void being the 13th shard, it makes sense that in terms of technology and culture, they may be more advanced, because they're the equivalent is Final Fantasy 13.
Neela, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to mention it if you hadn't. That it seems likely that time must have passed faster there. That, or the Asians just made up these Arasites and just sort of handed them like, here, this will help you fight. Either way, it's definitely notable. And as I recall, it actually transformed the heroes of the 13th into these monsters. We see that in when we fight Kukulane in
That's
In
right.
the Void Arc.
in the Void Arc
Void
itself.
Arc.
Thank you.
Yeah. They became the first Void Scent, essentially.
That was once a warrior of light.
Which is another kind of worms, because if it was caused by Oracite, what are exactly Voicen? Are they Lucavi?
It seems I mean, this is getting a little afield, but my assumption would be they're not strictly Lucavi, because they didn't invite this thing in or get taken over by it. It seems to be the Final Fantasy 14 take on Lucavi, where you are warped. Again, this makes me think of Owen's explanation of primals. You know, you get a little bit of the influence, you get umbral, and you get that element. You get a lot, and you physically transform, and it cannot be reversed. That's what I'm thinking happened. It was the physical transformation, the transformation that turned the people of the Void into Void Sense, and I think the animals, and the people of the first into Sin Eater.
And that's exactly what it reminded me of as well, was actually tempering, but severely advanced tempering. But instead of coming from a primal out in the wild, it came from the Arasite containing the primal.
Pocket primal. But yes, that was my
if they were advanced, I mean, they could have it could have been synthetic Oracite. Not so that wouldn't have transformed them into Lucavi, but pseudo Lucavi, let's say, for example.
Given that Ultima is either only on the source or only active on the source that we know of, it makes sense that they wouldn't necessarily have her Arasite.
It's become a prevalent point now that we have a problem now with either Oracite or Allegan artifacts. It's just funny to me. Like, it's
now it's become from everything is Allegan to everything is Evilis.
It's either an Allegan artifact or it's an Evilis Oracite.
Or it even could be like a mixture of the two, depending on how things with Save the Queen kind of played out.
Yes.
That's what I was going to mention.
Like seriously, like it really does boil down to one or the other, and it's like,
We've had all these years trying to solve this, and we haven't solved one or the other.
And I bet in Endwalker it's going to be a matter of, like, it could be Allegan, it could be Evilis, or it could be Amarot, or it could be Garlemald.
We just keep adding to our problems. We've got two. Let's add a third.
It's just going to be a concept matrix in Endwalker.
Right. And Ultima Seraph's going to turn out to have emerged from one of those or something.
I am your mother, I am your maker, I am Evilis.
Space alien?
Genova.
No, I
Anyways.
hate it. Oh, sludge, why? Why? Ikiorum.
Oh, did we kill Meowth? No, we did not. No, that's not enough of a kill Meowth. No moment.
We've got time.
We
And
do.
I agree. I hope Estinian does not come back after a time jump with old man skin shading.
Going back
Oh,
to the
stop it.
Igiorum point. So Igiorum was also very prideful. She did not like losing, especially to their what was it? They called them Warriors of Light. At the first part, or first off, correct?
The ones of the 13th?
Yes.
Indeed.
And so, seeing as if she lost to them, it would set back their plans. So instead of Igiorum just kind of setting up this match here, she went ahead and completely overly defeated them.
I think the word is raffle stomped.
Sure.
No?
Anyone else? No, I'm not going to add that to it.
You're not. Oh, man. The 13th is interesting to me because it's aspected to darkness, and it's also the furthest from the source in the diagram. So I think it was a mixture of them being very dominant in their ethereal alignment, and it makes sense that they went for the 13th first. It would have been the easiest for them to have won.
Yeah, it was the inexperienced bringer of light. He was not yet forged in the fires of battle, and it basically ended up with him losing and flooded the world in darkness and rendered it a nigh empty void. And then the remaining Ascians deemed it the 13th, unable to be rejoined with Hydaelyn. It was just a complete mess.
Yeah, so I actually have a theory about what the Flood of Darkness actually was. And if we look at Shadowbringers and darkness being the power of creation and light being the power of stasis, if you go all in on darkness and you're creating so quickly, and that requires an enormous amount of aether to create, and the faster you create, the more that aether is expended until there's nothing left. And I think that the void was just a world of rampant creation once that flood of darkness came through, and it just burned itself out.
Yeah,
Possibly.
I think in E9, the summoned cloud of darkness kind of explains a bit how the power of creation how the power of darkness influences growth in her battle dialogue. It was interesting sometimes to read
But-
from the cloud of darkness.
Go ahead, Neela.
Back on what you were saying, Kobaran, we do know that the Void Center are insatiable in their quest for more ether, so there's something going on inside them. I wonder if it's if it's a creation thing, or if it's just because their souls are so astral. I'm not sure.
I think it's just because they're expending ether at such a monumental rate that as soon as they get some, it's gone.
It would explain the insatiable,
Right. And then they have such overpowering wills because astrally, the will just overcomes everything else. Whereas in the umbral aspect, I'm getting this backwards, I think.
No, you have it.
Okay. In the astral aspect, it's suppression.
Yeah, the umbral. Umbral is light. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm
Backwards.
also turned around.
You had it right the first time, but I think you thought you misspoke and respoke. It's fine.
Got it. There is a segment in the Encyclopedia Eorzea, in the first one, just referring to the void, on the topic of how far it is from the source. They do kind of touch on that a little bit. And it says on page 296, though one could walk 1,000 malms and never reach the other, the void and the source lie but a hair's breadth apart, separated by an unseen veil serving to prevent travel between the two worlds.
That is such an interesting and specific way to put it.
It's also a little bit unclear as well. Like, I hate to sound completely contradictory, but the way the rift works, that's the hair's breadth away. Like,
It's worth bearing in mind that when the Ascians rejoin shards, it's called dimension compression. They're essentially other dimensions.
Correct. It's like an overlay.
Exactly. I personally view it as like a whole bunch of planets in the same spot, but each one like sort of alternate universe.
Exactly.
Basically, yeah. Which has to be really funny to watch from a distance in the space.
wonder if you can
I
even
don't think. Sorry, go ahead, Neela.
Oh, I wonder if you can even see it because the moon, each shard seems to have its own moon. The first has a moon. The source has a moon.
Yes.
No reason to think it didn't get isn't engulfed in the warping effect. Obviously it can't go. I assume it wouldn't ripple out to affect the entire universe because that's a little crazy. But at least locally.
Now, I'd like to think that the other shards were pushed slightly out of phase with the universe. So when Midgard-Sormer was coming, he couldn't see anything but the source because there wasn't anything else there on his plane of, I guess, on his wavelength.
Indeed. And given that the Ascians can't travel bodily they can travel between the shards, but they have to shed their bodies in the process. It's not as simple as just, oh, look over there.
Did we canonically discuss the Omega Raid final cutscene as Midgard-Sormer is Omega is passing what sound
Passing by the shards.
aspected planets?
I'm not sure that that
we
Sormer
have-
is
I-
passing through
We
the
are
shards.
split on our interpretation of that, as I recall.
I think we are split. We may still be split. Mine was, as all of the shards have a primary aspect, and all of the shards listed, they're listed, I think, as barren, vortex, frozen, these kind of descriptors. It was interesting. Kind of the wrong week, I guess, but part of what I was trying to figure out is whether Omega was having memories or whether we were actually, like, the dialogue happens as we're traveling with Alpha. So is that presently, or is it remembering?
That's a memory. That's a data log.
It did seem
That's a data
like
log.
memory to
Okay.
me.
Because
The
he
way the
was.
cutscene plays, it feels like a memory to me, meaning it would be
It
in the
was.
past. And
It was in
therefore-
pursuit of Midgard-Sormer, and he was checking through the planets,
Right.
well, and stars as you refer to him as such, and he would pass by these aspected stars, which line up with the elemented aspected stars that had been already rejoined.
Exactly.
I personally
and so you can,
disagree. I don't think it lines up at all. I think they were flying through interstellar space, but those are the interpretations we have.
Yeah,
So-
the
Yes.
only issue I have with that interpretation would be when it happened, because we know that the dragons were already on the source before the second astral era. So there would have only been one rejoined shard at that point. So they would have had to still been out there phasing through reality if they were traveling that way.
maybe Omega arrives late. I don't know. This could just be a misstep on Square's part.
I
actually
just
had
think
that.
they're just passing planets. It didn't seem like a misstep.
Or-
It just like we are going through a lot of space.
Yeah, I honestly thought the same. It was meant to, I think it was meant to emphasize the magnitude of Omega's journey through space. I mean, we tend to look into everything, and it's fair, but that my impression is
That's
that
just
in
my
this,
interpretation of it.
yeah, I mean it's fair. We don't have either confirmation that it's wrong, so you can think it.
That the only and it's like Neela said, or not Neela, but Cobron said, the only thing that's holding it back is the time frame in which it happened. And if the time frame matches up, if the time dilation or the time between the shards, between the shards matches up, then it's for a certainty that was it. Anyways, continuing on.
Sorry,
Let's
just
see.
processing a few brain things.
That's fine. So, after Igiorum did a whoopsie, she sought to redeem herself by following La Habrea to the source and aiding him there. So, yeah, she screwed up royally, and then in order to actually try and fix the damage, which essentially couldn't be fixed. I mean, the damage was already done. That world was done and gone, and it's, as far as we know, it can't be saved, but there could be a way for us to save it.
I have thoughts.
My guess would be that Ascian methodology cannot save it. The Warrior of Light, however, can do anything they set their mind to, apparently.
Right. Plot armor. But correct. And so it was at that point, I suppose, that they began working 2 per shard. I believe past that point.
Something to
After
guide
you-
the other, basically like a steadying hand, just in case one of them were to like come up with a stupid idea.
Great job, Igiorum.
Or
She
La
was
Yeah.
doing her best. Genuinely, I actually the fact that they were first trying a rejoining of darkness, and then they switched to doing elemental rejoinings, because after that they started wind, lightning, fire, so on. Makes me wonder if they didn't really know what they were doing, or if the light dark thing is much harder to get right, given that the light also nearly engulfed an entire shard. It seems like that's easier to mess up, perhaps, but it makes me wonder if they also learned a lot about the process from the, oopsie.
Oh, absolutely. They had no
Yeah.
idea what they were doing. They were in
Emmett,
completely uncharted territory.
Emmett definitely was like, we learned a lot from that experience.
He said something
Yeah,
like,
he
"And I
was.
confess ignorance."
Yeah,
Learning
or
experience.
haste and I confess ignorance.
Also, I think it was. I think the mess up of the 13th was a really defining point for the rejoining effort, because the Essence were trying to different methods to the rejoinings, and they found this one, and well, kind of worked, but the 13th means that they lost a shard, and that means the world would never be rejoined as it once was. And so I can see the Asians deciding to, okay, let's not make more experiments. Let's settle on the thing that that we know it works. And so ever since the 13th happened, they haven't not really changed their method or searched for another one. Let's quote him itself, for a path of lesser tragedy, because we know that rejoinings are not precisely, well, it's rough. So I think the 13 was kind of this point. We cannot risk losing another shard. So let's do what we know it works, and still we have the first, which almost, well.
Go ahead, Cor.
I get the sense that if they had managed to do all the other rejoinings, they probably would have tried to revisit the 13th as like something they would try to salvage as much as possible.
And that
But
was
for
my
the time being, they were going to just be fine with letting it be and trying to use the Void Scent as tools as much as possible.
And that was my assumption as well. Now, the Void Quest did make me wonder. I think we'll get into that later, so I won't bring it up now. But it does say something on the subject. Actually, it reminds me a lot of the second short story with regard to Emmett Selk and Elidibus, Ere Our Curtain Falls.
Yes.
The implication I gleaned from that was the Asian, or the convocation, the newly tempered convocation, saw Elidibus return and thought, we can get everyone else back. We have a tool. We have a way to fix it. Why would we look any further? That's what the rejoinings seem like to me. They messed up on the Void, but they were like, but we know how to make this work, so why would we look for another way? Except for Emmett Selk, who we know was looking for a path of lesser tragedy.
All of the mentions of curtain.
I mean,
Yeah,
killing me.
big same. I mean, but we will talk about that. I think on another episode.
Yes.
Yeah, we could get into like Emmett's motivations included as well.
The
and
Emmett
like a
episode, I
whole
think, is
other-
where I'll leave it to
Yeah.
you guys.
Right. Well, definitely. But we could go on for quite a while about his motivations. Suffice it to say, I don't think that he was always sold on the idea of sticking to just rejoinings, especially after the 13th incident, but he was kind of resigned to just doing what was working.
So, going on from Igiorum to now, let's kind of go over what happened, what the world of darkness kind of. Actually, no. Let's go back to Unukalai and the warrior of light, the inexperienced warrior of light. Who would like to speak first?
Well, we know that the warriors of
Unkalai.
light all fought solo,
Unukalai.
like a bunch of fools.
Unukalai.
I can help you with the pronunciation if you want.
Go ahead.
So here's the part that sucks. It's actually, as a lot of stars are named, because this comes from the name of a star in the Ophiuchus specifically in the Serpens constellation, the snake part of Ophiuchus. As a lot of star names are, it's Arabic, and I happen to speak Arabic. It's pronounced Ankalhia, but nobody can pronounce that, and English has like bastardized it into Unukalhai. But every time I see Unukalhai, I'm like, it's Ankalhia. Because that actually makes sense to me. It means the neck of the serpent.
So it's like foregoing English pronunciation is something like Unukalilla.
That's pretty
More or
close.
less. Okay.
Anyway, yeah, you just have to like say it as best you can because it's not an English word. It's not even close.
Yeah, I'm just gonna use the. Nope, I'm not even gonna try.
You could call him Callie for short.
What's up, Callie?
It's a cute name. At any rate, so yes, it comes from. It's not a name in the typical sense. It actually very much makes me think of the Asian titles. In fact, in the way it sounds, and it's taken from a star in the constellation of Ophiuchus, which is tied to Elidibus, which makes sense because we were introduced to him through Elidibus.
So I'm gonna go over him at least. I'm just gonna refer to him because I hate pronouncing people's names wrong. It's one of my things. So yes, I'll refer to him as Callie. He was born on the 13th reflection of Heidelin, the world that became known as the Void. He was gifted with the Echo. He's barely more than a child when the world ended and was unable to stop the flood of darkness from transforming his world. He was rescued by Elidibus, the emissary of the Asians, who explained the importance of maintaining the balance between light and darkness. Callie continued to serve as Elidibus' disciple, swearing never to allow what happened to his world happen to any other. Anyone else want to add to this before I continue?
There's kind of a sad irony in him making that swearing out and then serving the Asians and helping them do something arguably worse to other worlds.
I wonder if he added something onto his speech when he met him, like this could happen again, or this you could prevent this, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, how much he actually told him about what they were actually trying to achieve.
My assumption would be that the cycle of rebirth is completely halted on the Void. I don't think that can happen when everyone's into Void Scent. So that could be the thing where you look at that and you're like, yeah, there's a worse fate. I don't know. It's very much a personal opinion thing. And again, he was basically a child. So
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
like the
you're
light
gonna
stream
feel-
just vomited up all the souls, and they just kind of hang out.
And that's the ironic thing, because Callie was a child when he met Elidibus, and Elidibus was a child after we said goodbye to him.
I think
Um,
Elidibus kind of saw something familiar in him, and that's why he kind of plucked him, and mostly him, but him and Ciela off of the 13th. but then immediately stuffed them in an ice bucket.
I mean, presumably the rest
around-
were all void monsters, so...
Kid needed a
Yeah.
nap.
It was around around the time that he saved Kelly, that he met Silva, or Sayela, a woman from this world who had also been saved by the Ascians, namely Mitron and Logrif. Now, Sayela is a completely different story altogether. But we'll go over Kelly's story first. So, after we defeated Thornton VII, the Warrior of Light is told that a visitor is waiting for them in the Scion headquarters, the Rising Stones. They found a young masked man who introduced himself as... I'm not going to pronounce this. Callie.
He won't be offended if you say it wrong.
I know.
Here? Is that what you said?
I didn't hear what you said, sorry.
Your pronunciation, did you say Ankalhir?
That's pretty close, yeah.
Interesting.
I'm not going to go into the,
We'll call him
the
Calvin.
letters that Arabic has that English doesn't, but it starts with one of those, of course.
So, he claims to have been sent by his master to aid the Scions of the Seventh Dawn in facing the coming threat of the Icons, primals that were summoned during the Third Astral Era. Known as the Warring Triad, they were defeated and imprisoned by the Alakan Empire and sealed on the floating island of Azisla. The actions of the Thornton VII, who tried to gain their power for himself, weakened the seals, making it possible for them to break free. A process the Agarian Empire may hasten in their attempts to uncover the secret of binding primals. Urianger corroborates this explanation. So, I'm sure you all remember the Warring Triad questline. It started with him, as him appearing in the Rising Stones headquarters, and we're like, who is this? Anyone else would like to add?
It's probably also tied to, at the very end of, I forget exactly when it was, but there's a scene where we see Elidibus and La Habrea talking, and then La Habrea leaves. They're talking about Nabrialis' demise. That's right, it was after that. And then Elidibus hangs around, and Urianger comes up and speaks to him, and especially the French and German kind of indicate that that's all tied together, that Urianger was tied to Unokalhai's, finding us, essentially.
No doubt.
Can I just say Unkali?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with what Kappa said and just call him ukulele from now on.
Ukulele also pretty close.
I could also try calling him my adopted son.
That'll work.
I mean,
So
I can go with my non-English pronunciation for that.
We're all listening.
That
That's
was
funny.
Not how
not
it's
anywhere close.
I broke her.
That was not anywhere close, Cobb says. That's funny.
I like to think that Unkauhai ukulele was the 14 equivalent of the Winter Soldier. Just kept him in the
Okay.
freezer until he needed him.
This is skipping ahead a little bit, but I quite like how Taynor is trying to convince Unokalhai that he can't do it. He can't do the portal thing. And he's just like, yeah, bro, I've been around a while, so let's just try it.
We'll get there. We'll get there. That is quite a ways down. That is quite a ways down. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So before the Triad can be dealt with, the Warrior of Light is told to defeat the Primals Bismarck and Ravana, who have been resummoned by their respective worshippers. Unkali wants to assist, offering instruction on how to confront them, including 2 enigmatic gems associated with each primal. When it comes to deal with the Warring Triad directly, Unkali instructs the Warrior of Light to journey to Azisla alongside Kral, Urianger, and Ishtola. He leads them to Containment Bay S1T7, where Sephiroth, the first of the Triad, to risk being awakened, is held. When leaving the area, Unkali is approached by Regula Van Hydrus. Unkali criticizes the Guardian's attempt to control the power of the Primals. Regular rebuffs this lecture, but leaves without a fight. Cryle inquires about Unkali's motives and background, and though he shows a brief flicker of emotion, he quells it without revealing anything of his past. After returning back to the Rising Stones, Unkali reveals more of the background of Sephiroth, and offers the Warrior of Light an elegant tombstone that will allow him to enter a combat simulation, pitting them against a stronger version of the icon. Anything else? Any other ones? Any other want to join in? Before I continue?
The passage you read, kind of made me. I mean, in some Final Fantasy titles, I'm not an expert, but I think I know a bit about Final Fantasy VI, and the whole warring thread is based on Final Fantasy VI. Yes.
Yes.
So when you mention the part of Funukalai, giving us these stones associated with Ravana and Bismarck that we use to unlock the X trials. Of course, it's mostly a trinket that it's used to unlock content, but at the same time, I'm kind of wondering, what if the so-called aura site in the 13th, because it was it happened the thing because of primals and, let's say, aura site, yes. So maybe actually it was something closer to Final Fantasy VI Magicite.
That could be. That could definitely be it.
And at the same time, it would tie with Final Fantasy 13 because to summon an Eidolon in 13, they all have their specific Eidolith that every LC has in their crystallized soul. So that got me thinking. Just don't mind me.
No, it's fine.
It is interesting. In a lot of ways, like, the Void is almost a world of ruin, not in the same sense, but it's definitely like a world that's brought to complete ruination.
Yeah, like a
So
world of darkness.
Speaking of 6 made me think of that. A very specific type of ruination, yes, because obviously the first is a world of nigh ruin in a different sense.
So, let's see. Unkali brings word to the warrior that Regula had broken the wards that Oriandra had used to seal off the aether-chemical research facility. Conferring with the Scions, Unkali believes that Hydros is after the Genesis expression, one of the most powerful pieces of Allagan technology, and recommends pursuing and, if possible, slaying him. While Unkali, Oriandra, Ishtola, and Cryle venture to the facility, fighting off Garlean troops. Kryle's injured, and Kali stays behind to protect her. Although the Warrior of Light defeats Hydrus and prevents him from retrieving the Allagan Tome Lith, he escapes. Oriandra asks to speak to the Warrior of Light and Unkali in private, revealing that it was he who deduced it was Unkali who broke the seal on the facility, hoping to lure Van Hydrus into a trap where he could be killed. Unkali admits that this is to be the case, and Oriandra chides him, claiming that he had trusted the Scions enough to tell him this plan. It may have succeeded. Oriandra asks the Warrior of Light to forgive Unkali and to conceal it from the other Scions. And then, to atone for his lack of honesty, Unkali shares some of his personal history with the Warrior of Light and reveals that he too possesses a form of the Echo. He hails from a conflict-ridden land where he learned magic to survive until his master recruited him. He tells the story of another world where people believed that they could harness the power of primals using Auracite, leading to the destruction of their world. The fear of it happening to Eorzea causes him to despise Van Hydrus and the Garlean Empire. There's your passage on Auracite. Meowth, Cobron, Neela, Kor, Fowl.
There's
It's
something.
No,
you go ahead first.
Cor.
No, you go ahead first.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
That's the same issue we've been discussing when it comes to what exactly is Auracite in 14 terms. Because at this point we have the original Auracite that we know that comes from Ultima. We have a synthetic Auracite that we know the Garleans manufactured. and we have white orosite with that we know it's manufactured as well. So it's kind of like in evolution titles, the distinction between magicite and nethicite, and it's kind of a mess because it's just a bunch of crystals that there's each one is for one purpose, and when Unukalai says the thing about Orosite, you actually don't know what the fuck was Orosite meant to be in the 13th. Like to what material they gave that name, because at the moment I recall this was Heaven's Word, and the only Orosite we were familiar with was White Orosite. But White Orosite is a product of the source. It was designed by Charlayan scholars, so it was probably not the thing that they had there. So what exactly did the people of the 13th call Orosite? That's the question for me.
That's true. Cork, you were gonna.
Yeah. I when I looked at this situation more recently on my alt, I was very surprised by a few things, mainly in terms of it just being like kind of passed over a little bit, that the Allegans had something called the Genesis expression at all that sounded an awful lot like creation magic from a certain point of view. But also just thinking about how Anukulhai had all of this animus towards the Empire and what they were doing, and he seemed to be very ignorant of who had created the Empire to begin with and to what end, while still seeming to work for Elidibus. Like, it really makes me think how much he really knew about any of what was going on, and that he was then relaying to the Scions.
I believe they call him a couple times on not being completely forthright. There's one point where one of them, I forget exactly who, sneaks off to kill the captives that are like, because they have people in stasis to
Yeah,
keep
he did that.
alive.
Yeah,
That
he
was
actually
him.
did that. Yeah,
I
he
thought
did
so.
that alone because he thought that the Warrior of Light should not sully their hands with such a necessary but vile act.
Yes, and Yashtola, I think it was, who took him to task.
Additionally, I also found this quest to be another example of Urianger keeping secrets and then encouraging others, including Wool, to keep them as well.
Well, we have our own secrets now.
Mhm.
Kappa and Chad asked an interesting question. The Heart of Sabik, is that Orosite?
We've landed on it being nethicite, which is just basically black orosite.
Okay. I
And that's
don't know what the
kinda-
difference is.
That's kind of its whole other thing.
That's a Meowth question.
Nethicite is in Evilist, they distinguish between magicite, which is in 14 it would be a charged elemental crystal. Okay, if you use that crystal, eventually it's going to deplete of energy. So
It's a
magicite
battery.
works basically. So magicite, once its power is spent, you can no longer use it. Nethicite is empty at the beginning, but it can store great amounts of energy and then release it, and then you can use, when it's released, you can use it again to recharge. It's by itself it's empty, but you can use recharge and boom, basically.
So it's essentially a crafting crystal.
Sure. I can read the entry from fandom real quick. Nethicite Hamaseki, literally exercising stone, is a powerful source of magical energy in the world of Ivalice in Final Fantasy XII. A subtype of magicite, nethicite absorbs copious amounts of mist and can release it as magical energy. Historically, most nethicite was created by the Acuria. Vana.
They just keep popping up.
He's a heretic.
This
is 12, but
now it's a heretic.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, deifacted nethicite is too strong to be controlled properly and is dangerous when it cannot be. That reeks of the Heart of Sabik. And then manufactured nethicite is weaker but safer and easier to use. This strikes me more as the evolution orosite type.
I would make a point, however. The Curia created the Nethicite, but the thing with Vena is that the Curia had a de-facto Nethicite, which is the Suncrest. And then Vena, in her mind, probably it was a brilliant idea, went to Vane and Dr. Sid to reveal to them how to create Nethicite, and that is manufacturing Nethicite. And effectively, by how Nethicite works, it's not the same name, of course, but how do you call it? The way it works, it's similar to white orosite.
That's what I was going to mention as well. Is that what you're describing of Nethicite, as it can absorb a lot and then release it? That's what we see when, say, we fight Nabrialis. They absorb his soul, and then they're like, no, you have to shatter it quick before it gets released again, before you escape.
Mm-hmm. The question is that, like, it is that, as Neil pointed in chat, white orosite is something that Charlians know how to make, which, if we go by comparison with white orosite to manufacture Nethicite, the secret was revealed to mankind how to craft this by a certain rogue Curia. I'm going to leave that there.
The image
So-
for Nethicite is closer to a
basically-
purple as well.
Yeah. Basically, concern.
Man, you got a bad cough today. Anyways,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna move on to the next section. So Unukalai later admits that he had been mentally placing the warrior of light on a pedestal, seeing them more as the embodiment of an ideal than as an individual, and promises to not underestimate their resolve in the future. God, this sounds awfully familiar.
I was going to say.
He really becomes a metaphor in a lot of ways.
Regula Van Hydrus confronts them later, offering an alliance. Having decided that the elegant method of containing primals was flawed and thus useless to the Empire, he wished to destroy Zervin and his thralls. The Scions reluctantly agree to the alliance and can travel to the Containment Bay, where Regula's troops are already fighting Zervin's thralls. During the battle, Regula sacrifices himself to save Unukalai, believing that his powers are better suited to end this primal threat. After Zervin's defeat, Unukalai, ashamed of his self-perceived weakness compared to the Scions, asks them to meet him back at the Rising Stones, where he unmasks and reveals his past. They learn that he faced the end of his world alone, telling him that he no longer has to fight by himself, and welcome him as a member of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. And despite the newfound friendships he had forged, Unukalai insists on putting on his mask again. He presents the Warrior of Light with a tombstone containing that on Zervin, and of course we get the Zervin EX. Anyone like to add to this before I go into the Shadowbringers part of Unukalai?
Well, it's not super important, but it's the looking back at him and the insistence on wearing a mask and the significance of taking it off is a lot more interesting after 5.0.
Yes, it is.
He was way ahead of the curve with this pandemic stuff.
It's true. Also, being a soul means you can't catch diseases because no body. It's very clever of him, actually.
Yeah, nobody has to worry.
Yeah, but still he was wearing a mask, so...
He had all of his bases covered.
So let's go. What he was doing between the Warring Triad quest line and Shadowbringers, which was sitting in the Ocular, spouting out cryptic lines of text that got updated maybe every other patch.
4 years stuck.
4
in the
years.
office doing
God.
nothing.
4
Like,
years he was
just-
stuck in the office, and we have not used the office since he's been in there.
Pretty much, like, it's just been sitting there as his kind of like stasis bay, where we could go in there and talk to him occasionally, but nothing.
Door's
really
locked. He
occurred.
can't use the restroom. It smells really bad when we open the door.
He doesn't.
How
need
did
to,
Minfilia manage in this room?
All right. So moving on to the Shadowbringers part. After learning that Elidibus had died, Unkali admits the Warrior of Light he had mixed feelings regarding the news. Looking for a new purpose, he decides to reunite with Silva, or Sayela. With the help of the Wall, Arandro, and MacLeod, he journeys to the First and meets Sayela in the Crystarium. They discuss the possibility of restoring their world similar to the way that the First was beginning to recover from their flood of light. This is what I mentioned earlier. To ascertain the feasibility of such an undertaking, MacLeod suggests checking on the current conditions of the 13th by opening a Void Gate. Since Tainor can create Void Gates, we'll touch upon Tainor a little bit later. They ask for him to help. Unkali uses Nailbert's crystal to learn how to open up the gates as well. Together with Tainor and Unkali open a gate large enough to get the information needed. MacLeod begins work on a way to restore the 13th, but warns it could take years to find a solution. Despite this, Unkali is pleased with their progress. In the meantime, Tainor invites Unkali to join him and his friends in protecting the First, to which he happily agrees to. He can be subsequently found with Silva, Sayela. They're interchangeable in the Crystarium.
So there's a lot to unpack with those quests. I want to start with how they determined that the void actually had an impact on the First, drawing darkness out of it, and that's the reason why light was so prevalent there to begin with.
Go for it. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so when the 13th fell, we've got that time dilation thing again, where maybe 20,000 years have gone by in regards to the 13th. A much shorter amount of time has passed on the First, and so we've got maybe 100, 150 years where light has been extremely prevalent on the First, and it's probably still a relatively new society as far as how much time has passed. So I think Ronka, they said, was roughly analogous to how old the Allegan Empire was.
That sounds right.
Yeah, but that was kind of the start, I think, of really recorded history on the First, whereas on the source it was roughly around the first astral era, which was, I want to say, around 10,000 years, maybe a little bit less than that. And that's really when we see light starting to have a lot of prevalence over darkness, and the Asians not being as powerful until eventually Ardbert and his crew just completely wiped the floor with Mitron and Logriff.
They got thwacked.
Yep. And another thing I like to think is, and I know some of you disagree with me on this, that Tainor, Timothy, whatever his name is, that he and Unkali, Ukulele, are actually two parts of the same shard, much like the Warrior of Light and Ardbert were.
I tend to think that you are correct, that they've implied that, certainly. But I want to see where they go with it more. And I definitely get the sense that the Void quests are also like prepping for some perhaps distant 7.0 expansion to the Void.
I want to touch on that if you don't mind.
Go.
So, unless it's not time, of course, but Eden. I'm just gonna throw a few things at chat. We have an Eden. It's growing shrubs right now. We have 2 physical children, I guess, who can rip holes into the rift, and we can maybe shove the thing through.
Yeah,
7.0 go.
We also have essentially a not completely raised, but mostly raised Asian in Gaia's case. She's still got her body.
So we've got
and
a little
whatever
triumvirate
arena.
here, and a Warrior of Light squad, like, on the First. There's things that they can do here, and I'm really excited to see them after.
Yeah, like they could basically have Reign and Gaia pilot the corpse of Eden, Mitron, with the assistance of Unkali and Tainor to send it through, and the Warrior of Light squad from the role quests to actually like carry out alongside us whatever they plan to do on the Void to like make it recover. And Silva could be team captain. Yeah, she could coordinate things. I like it.
And then we can do a side quest to help the Wandering Stairs get a new bartender.
Oh, you know what? That would be. So Ara brought something up in the chat, which I think would be absolutely awesome is as an end cap to the Zodiac Hydaelyn story, and this is on a complete tangent here. We do get all of the Asians back, but as kind of a redemption, they all go to the 13th and they kind of make their new convocation. on the
Right.
13th.
They could have Gaia, especially as Logrif, like leading that initiative of them going to the 13th and having that be their first way of making up for the losses of the rejoinings.
Considering that the
awesome.
blessing of light was key to containing and manipulating the excess light on the first, this is a thing I've also thought of. Yes, it makes perfect sense that you use your blessing of darkness to draw in, control the darkness.
Yes. Yes,
It's-
Gaia's Gaia's pretty much what Rin was for the first. Because if you pause to consider, Rin is the Oracle of Light, but her blessing actually doesn't exactly spread light. It's actually more about repressing overflowing light. That's how she cures, for example, the people in Yulmore that were affected by the meal. And
How she keeps us from dying multiple times.
yeah.
She seems to have control over it. It's possible that could include, magnifying it, but she has no reason whatsoever to do so. So we never even see it. If that's a thing, it may not even be a thing. Interestingly, you say that, and that my mind immediately jumped to, oh yeah, they were both born with someone else trying to take over their body.
Mm-hmm.
That awful Minfilia.
It's also interesting that Gaia's powers are unique. I mean, we know all of the Asians have specialities, right? We've got Nabrialius, he seems to be good at meteors, right? Etc.
Yeah, double and triple.
Gaia has access
I'm
to
magic too.
the actual Hammer of Darkness, and
A
whether
lot
we
of
were
time.
mistaken or not, the story gave her the name Oracle of Darkness for a while. So, and she was supposed to pilot Zodiac, was she not?
She was the original person chosen
Choice.
for it, but
I'm still
in-
baffled by that.
I want to know more about that decision of why they shifted from her
It makes
to
no
Elizabeth.
sense to me.
I do want to know the why of it for sure.
As far as I
Well-
can determine, the why of it is Gaia means the planet, the entire planet itself. And they were like, well, if we're going to give her this name, we need to tie it to that somehow. Sure.
It's not just that. Aries, which is Logrif's constellation and zodiac symbol, is the first. When you're kind of reciting the zodiac wheel, Aries is probably the one that usually goes first. So technically, she would be the first seat of the convocation. It's a wheel, so it's kind of like a round table. No one is more preeminent than the other. But if you're numbering them, Aries comes first. And also, there's the fact that the term Oracle of Light, Oracle of Darkness, is not exactly perfectly translated. I mean, yes, but no.
It was made up by the people of the first.
Not really. I mean,
It was.
in Japanese, the oracle part is more like priestess. So if Logrif, for example, let's say that the seat of Logrif is some sort of high priestess of sorts, it would make sense that they would choose her as the one that would be conducting a ceremony to summon a god. If I mean, her epithet in 12 is the transcendent.
Yeah,
I
which
mean,
is infernal big.
So I think I would say it's not just that her name is Gaia. It's many things. Hmm. Yes. I mean, it's kind of a spirit maiden of sorts, shrine maiden. In if we go by Greek culture, yes, the oracles the Oracle of, probably the most famous is the Oracle of Delphos, who were priestesses dedicated to the god Apollo.
Apollo, the one associated with the sun.
You know, the Warrior of Light.
and art and poetry and that one.
Making an Aslan connection there.
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
So before we go off topic here, I would like to go now into Sayela. So does anyone want to cover this topic, or should I just go straight into the passage?
Go for it.
I'm watching.
Go.
Sayela hailed from the 13th, one of the reflections of the source that had come into existence as a result of Heidelin defeating her counterpart Zodiark. Sayela lost her home when the 13th was consumed by darkness and became the void due to Igiorm's machinations. She was saved at the last second by the Asians Logrif and Metron, and with her and Unkawai as their world's only saviors, Logrif and Metron convinced Sayela that she could help them in saving the remaining worlds through causing rejoinings, or the Ardor, but she was not told the full process. Brought to the first, Sayela established herself as a villainous mastermind known as the Shadowkeeper, with the task of secretly to groom the world's young adventurers into the Warriors of Light. Sayela created the cover of an unassuming yet mysterious mercenary when she threw her lot in with Ardbert and created his friends as the numbers grew while gaining the crystals of light. Eventually, she revealed herself as the cause of all the troubles that they had dealt with and bared steel against them. Though Ardbert defeated her, he has spared her due to their past camaraderie, and he and his companions turned their weapons on Logrif and Metron. The battle ended with the Asians' apparent demise and an unintentional triggering of the Flood of Light, with Ardbert and his companions ending up being recruited by Elidibus. Anyone want to start talking, or should I continue?
So with Sayela Silva, this is really interesting because it kind of reminds me of how scams work, where you've got an initial person who was scammed, and then the scammer's like, well, go get money from this person. And so she hops over to the first, goes to Ardbert and them, screws them over, causes the flood, and then now they're the ones getting scammed, and they're the ones who are told, okay, you got to go to this other place, scam this other person. So they go to the source in order to, do what they're going to do on the source. I just thought it was really interesting how it was just this progression of the same thing happening over and over again.
You might something of a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to mention that the thing that would prompt the Ardbert and his crew to manifest the crystals of light was precisely a form of sacrifice, which is as if you awaken to that blessing of light if you sacrifice something. Which, I mean,
It's easy in the source. All you got to do is manifest it out of the ether.
Yes, but at the same time, Silva.
It works either way.
Yes, Silva. At the very end, she tried to take on the mantle of villain, and it turned into forcing a battle between heroes and villains, even though they were actually grown to be close friends. But it was kind of the role they had to play, and Mitron kind of presents the thing as some sort of a tale when we battle E10. Yes, E10. Yes. So it's kind of actually you have the option to ask Mitron who's going to play the role of Arbor. They chose the word role for I think for a very specific reason, and it just reaffirms the idea that it's just a cycle of a stage play in which everyone's steps are guided by a higher force. In this case, of course, I mean, I couldn't I will.
Yep.
Meowth is dead.
Well, I'll steal a moment.
F in chat for Meowth.
Steal a moment to say what I wanted to say, if that's all right. Till
Go
she
ahead.
makes. I did find it interesting that I believe they said both Sayela and Silva are not her name. Certainly Sayela isn't, but I believe both of them are assumed names. We don't, to my knowledge, know her true name yet, which is a thing that makes me think of Amarod again. Another one of those. Oh, there she goes. Another one of those
Right.
connections. Another thing is that the Asians had told her, if you do this, rejoining the First will save your homeworld, will save the void.
That was the
I don't
gambit,
know if they were lying. I don't know if they had some plan, some way to twin light and darkness and say drag the void down. It's possible, and this is very much tinfoil speculation. It's possible that the eighth calamity would have been the one to tip it, and the source would have become so strong and powerful it would have sucked the rest of the shards in. But who knows? We don't know.
I don't think it would have been that powerful, but I do think that there were very much aligned interests in both what Uncalhai and Silva were trying to do in saving the 13th and what the Asians wanted to do, which was, even though it was lost, any potential to restore the 13th would have been something that they would have jumped on had they, expanded their imaginations enough to actually consider that.
I do agree. Why, when the void quests tell us, the Asians said it can't be done, we were writing it off, we're not worrying. That's why I was like, well, are the rest gonna suck it in? Because otherwise it's just lost. And I don't know. I hope we get more information on it, but
I like to think also that when they said that help us and you're going to save your world, they were probably meaning in the sense of help us and you'll save your real home, as it were, because they're all supposed to be, shards of the true world. So from the Asian perspective, saving the world means you're saving the true world. By saving the void, you're saving the true world.
they specified it was the void, but I would have to go back and check. I'm not actually sure.
Well, I imagine that they were implying to Sayela and Unukalhai at various points that they were going to save the 13th, but it was probably from their perspective as well a matter of, if we save the 13th, we can rejoin it, which means we'll save our world.
Is the concept here that just as the flow of void impacts the first, reversing it might reverse some of the damage?
That seems to be, I think, what was implied. Yeah.
Meanwhile, what you're saying is that the core rationalization that allows the Asians to not believe it a lie is that they're working to save the
yeah, that's what I was trying to bring up earlier, is that we don't really see the Asians do direct lies. They'll do a lot of omission, they'll do a lot of letting you make incorrect assumptions, but they don't usually say the XYZ and then that turns out to be a straight falsehood. So it would be odd for this one to be, but I'm not sure how that would work. It's not blatant to me.
Right, and I really do think that they believe their own perspective enough that they think it's true, even if it may be not always strictly true.
They drink their own Kool-Aid.
Right.
Ring being at play as well.
They drink their own grape Kool-Aid.
Zodiac.
Yeah,
Anyways,
probably
great
grape.
topic. As much as we love Kool-Aid,
I don't even know what that is.
Do we like what wild
you
berry
don't know
Kool-Aid?
what Kool-Aid is?
No.
What?
It's a powdered sugar that you put in water and it makes grape drink.
We,
Or
we,
fruit punch.
You
we,
really
Or-
don't know what Kool-Aid is. Hold on.
She's Spanish.
we don't.
I'm
we
sure
don't
they have a
have
product
that.
that's similar. They don't probably have Kool-Aid exactly.
I'm trying to remember the Spanish one or the Mexican one I used to drink all the time. Oh, like Tang or something.
Tang was good. Tang
Tang
was
was-
excellent.
Yes, but
Good.
I'm Spanish, not Mexican.
Yes.
Yes, but it may have come from one to the other. Did you know that Mexico was
Anyways.
once a colony of Spain?
Do you have
I-
international
So was
sections
Florida, and they
in-
have Kool-Aid.
in your groceries?
I can't recall anything similar to that. You say it's like a powder.
It's literally like it's basically flavored sugar that you dump in water, essentially. If we're being real about it.
Yeah, I think we have more we have more healthy things here.
Here in
It is
America, we
definitely
only
diabetes in a glass.
Well, anyway, several years later, a particularly powerful warrior hailing from the source, I wonder who that could be, began slaying the cardinal virtues along with other sinners. This new warrior of darkness sparked hope in her, sensing that they possessed Heidelin's gift like her friends had. As the cardinal virtues were destroyed and the night sky returned, Silva approached the warrior and invited them to take a trip across Northrend. Across their travels, she detailed how Ardbert's group formed and grew over time, and how each of them gained a crystal of light. Throughout her story, she hinted at the presence of another smiling companion, the untold tale of the sixth warrior. She concluded at the journey at Linkland, where she revealed her role as the Shadowkeeper, just as she did a century ago. She begged the warrior of darkness to kill her, and the final unpunished villain responsible for the flood and the tarnishing of her friend's memory. The warrior refused, as Ardbert's group had all been comrades in arms, and Silva's guilt was genuine. They suggested she continue to live on and tell the true tale of the warrior's light, and ensure the memories live on as originally intended. Relieved and grateful, Silva returned to Crystarium as Sayela, later admitting that even if they were to fight, she had grown too weak, only just having enough strength to wear her old armor and brandish her sword. Sayela felt a burden lift when the Warrior of Darkness gathered in the Crystarium to tell the story of the Warriors of Light from the first. Her friends can again be celebrated as the heroes they were. When she sees Ardbert mysteriously arrive, her happiness is replaced with wary confusion. He later returns with a star shower raining over the Crystarium. Ardbert, quote-unquote, declaring everyone bearing witness as Warriors of Light. Sayel visits the Warrior of Darkness at night to speak of what they saw. The adventurer reveals the Asian Olidibus had taken Ardbert's corpse and is using it for nefarious ends. She asks the Warrior of Light again to save the world and restore Ardbert's good name. Pause. Topic discuss. I
will say that in the Eden Raids, we also get a chance to essentially relive the battle that Sayela's companions and she had as the Shadowkeeper.
It's also a reference to Griever.
I have just a quick line to reference, which is one life for one world, a fair trade, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
She doesn't want to embattle her comrades. It's just that's the path that she's chosen. It's not a desire exactly. It's just,
what must be
trying to save base.
Albert quotes that to us.
He does. It just reminded me.
In 3.4, but I'm not sure. But I will have to check the cutscene again. But perhaps that's something that Silva told them, because the goal was for them to slay her. So one life for one world.
The intention was for her to set herself up as this big bad guy, the Shadowkeeper, evil. You've got to kill him. And they've been as you do
for the whole journey.
Yeah, as you do the quest, you'll see. That's mentioned. Oh, this Shadowkeeper thwarted this. They're built up as a bad guy, mysterious, unknown. And then when she reveals herself, the intention was for them to get all mad, to kill her, and to put the balance exactly where it would need to be for the rejoinder. When Ardbert said, "No, I won't kill you. You're my friend," chooses his heart, essentially. That's where it went awry, and they turned instead to fight the Asians who would send her here, and that caused the war. That caused the flood of light. That's where it went wrong. They went off plan, basically. The Asians were like, "Get them to do this," and then they didn't do that.
Yep, and it actually reminds me a lot of what Crystal Exarch did, where he tried to set himself up as the villain.
Indeed.
And die, but failed.
Yeah, actually.
I was very disappointed that they, regarding the Exarch, kind of believed him initially. I'm like, this is obviously not working out. Like, I don't believe you as the player character. I didn't believe him.
He never was a good actor.
Which I think was intentional, was for him to be like, you know, an obviously good guy. We're supposed to look at him and be like, "You're not evil." We're supposed to, in our hearts, make the same decision, not the game forcing us to make the same decision that Ardbert made, but us in our hearts, the players say, "I don't want to fight you." The way they take these themes and repeat them, and the way they make the repetition fresh and new and interesting, but yet still so strongly thematic in this story is really interesting to me.
I see a pattern also in there because now that you mention the Crystal Exarch trying to set himself up as villain, only for, in this case, Emet to be forced to enter the fray, and we don't know how bad that may end up being. You know, if we're going by equivalence in this in consequence terms, but at the same time, it kind of because we learn of Silva's thing through the rogue quest, but then we learn about Logrif and Mitron in the Eden quest. So when you do everything, you go through everything, you end up kind of, for the most part, you don't want to. You feel bad for Logrif and Mitron. You feel bad for Silva. You feel bad for the Exarch, and you feel bad for Emmet Silk. But neither the Warrior of Light or Albert knew that they were going to feel bad about that. So it's kind of like the player does, but the one involved was only seeing the Asians as their opponent, at least in that moment. Then later, then they realize, well, perhaps we may screw up.
There's more to the story.
Yeah, because Arbut outright says that because Arbut is the reason Eden exists. That's the big whoopsie on his part. And Arbut actually says, I sometimes thought that perhaps it was best for this world to be rejoined, and it's like a bit late to the party, but welcome.
I get the sense, reflecting on that a lot of the bigger powers involved, the Asians, Hydaelyn, Zodiark, etc., they always kind of underestimate how much their individual pieces on the board are actually going to potentially look at one another and realize, maybe I was wrong in my assumption of this individual who I've been set up against, and I need to reflect on the information that I'm gradually getting about them. And that's definitely the most true about the Warrior of Light, but it extends also to these other characters that are we also see them reflecting on their own newer information as they receive it. In particular, things like when we hand the Warrior of Light stones to Silva in the Crystarium during the beginning of the Void Quest, and she's like reacting to those memories and seeing how they still cared for her even after her betrayal, and just like promising to try and do better by their legacy as a result.
I'm so excited for the future. Like, I'm hyped about it for sure. But like,
yes.
This is such. I was just responding to a YouTube chatter, Lord Mawkish. They said maybe 7.0 is too soon. They do have a record of kind of letting plot lines dry up for a few years, and they will guaranteed come back to it. But
yeah, they're gonna let this one sit for a while.
But just being able to, I mean, even from the possible convocation seat perspective, like with Eden, maybe it is possible to reprime it for a joining, and they just didn't know that was feasible because Eden was created when Ardbert blasts him, killing Gaia in the process, and like over aspects Holy with convocation seat powers, and creates this gigantic world-destroying space mech. It's just really interesting.
People made a lot of assumptions on all fronts, I think, about what people would do and react to certain things, but also in like what they would believe regarding their own actions. And I think that also extends to the Asians and their assumptions about the 13th as a general thing.
So I'd like to go on to the next topic because we're about to reach about our half-hour point of the show.
Half
So
hour left,
this
yes.
one, I'm sorry,
Half hour left. Got it.
half hour left. Yeah. We're going over Tainor now. So Tainor and Neobert were born as descendants of a consortium of powerful magicians whose leaders sought to master the art of opening portals to other worlds to summon powerful entities from the void. To that end, they were taught in the arcane arts at an early age, their skills employed in dangerous experiments. One day, one of these experiments went wrong, and Tainor was sucked into a gap between the worlds, where he remained until the Warrior of Darkness rescued him. Due to the vagaries of traveling between worlds largely beyond his comprehension, what seemed like a relatively short period of time for the boy reached about 100 years in the world he had left behind. So there's your time compression again. Or time dilation. Tainor wakes up without memories and just remembers his name. Anguished at not being able to discover anything about his past, Tainor leaves alone and ends up under attack by Sin Eaters, but the Warrior of Darkness rescues him from danger. After the battle, the Warrior of Darkness has a vision of Tainor's past through the power of the Echo and sees him training with a young Neobert. Serig explains to Tainor that, as bizarre as is, the events in his memory must have occurred over 100 years ago. Now convinced that the young companion is the key to defeating the terrible Phronesis, Serig proposes that Tainor join the hunt for Phronesis. Anyone like to join in at this point, or shall I go?
Should be mentioned for anyone who hasn't managed to complete the magical rule quest that Phronesis is the mortal remains and mnemonic ether that is memory of Neilbert. He is basically sort of haunted by his inability to save his companion, that said Tainor.
Tainor begins to recover his memory and to remember the enchantments he learned. During his training, Tainor manages to open a portal and ends up attracting Phronesis to the site. Tainor manages to fend off one of Phronesis' holes and saves Serig from a terrible fate. After Tainor's training is completed, the party goes on to its final showdown. Tainor casts his magic to attract Phronesis, and although the battle was harrowing, the party is victorious. In the last moments of the Sin Eater, Neilbert's memories manifest, revealing how the Archmage continues to look for a way to bring his friend back from the crevice until the end of his days. Tainor offers words to comfort the vain hope of freeing him from his torment. Although it is unlikely that Tainor's words finally reached Neilbert, the experience nevertheless allowed the boy to come to terms with his past and his own conflicting feelings. Tainor expressed his gratitude to everything the Warrior of Darkness and Serig did for him, explaining their adventures together gave him the confidence he needs to fight on his own. Serig responds by inviting the boy to become his partner and continues the adventure together, and offer that Tainor enthusiastically accepts.
Sorry, I heard Taylor.
I'm sure everyone
That's
did.
fair.
You
That's
heard
fair.
Timothy. Is he a Paljal now?
Timothy.
Would anyone like to add to this?
When I replayed the ending with Phronesis being defeated and everything, and Tainor witnessing his friend's last
You knew deepest
wishes,
despair.
the deepest despair element. Like, I was instantly like, this has so many parallels, damn it, that it's almost like tragically
Well,
funny. And I was
thought
like,
the
I
same.
feel so badly for you, Tainor, because I totally get where you're coming from now.
I studied Shadowbringer's narrative extensively because Lightning Returns Final Fantasy 13 works in a similar way, and I'm convinced that the stories of each cardinal virtue translates into the ending of 5.0 in some way.
They absolutely do. I certainly have the same feeling.
What are the 4 names again, if you don't mind? My brain is braining.
Phronesis.
Phronesis is mine, don't you think?
The Kaya sign, Andrea, Phronesis, and Sophra sign.
Meowth can recite those off of the top of her head.
Mm-hmm.
The only one I remember is Dick Shine, and that's because of Pez.
my God.
You would.
No, I mean, with
I don't know. I like Levi McBullcut better.
with with 13 with 13 14 characters in 5.4 5.5, I've been through the story a number of times enough to remember stupid shit. So,
You're having a good influence on all of us to remember, which is appreciated given his final wish.
It's also worth noting that these cardinal virtues are named cardinal virtues. That they are from, I think, Catholic, from some sort of Christian tradition, where you have the four things you really should do. They mean
If it's
temperance,
cardinal
justice,
in virtue,
prudence,
it's certainly
and fortitude.
Catholicism.
They're cardinal virtues from old Christian traditions and are taking Eastern Orthodox names, Greek names for them.
So
yes,
it's not just cool made up names. It actually has like some historic significance, which is neat.
Right.
It plays into the whole sin eaters are the ones who are now purged of their sins, according to the first traditions.
Meowth?
Got him from Red. Wrote in chat.
No, it's just that the whole sin eater thing, when you think about their nature and stuff, I just when people this is going over the tangent, but with the introduction of sin eaters, I just cannot wrap my head around the fact that people keep calling Zodiac evil in the Endwalker Amano art.
Well, it should also be mentioned that sin eating is another tradition in certain old, I want to say Christian traditions, where they would take a newly dead person, they would place bread on their body to absorb the sin, and then they'd eat the bread so that person could go sinless to heaven.
Ew.
Like it's another thing. The mule, it's all they've taken a lot of interesting old historic themes here and made it into an it's not always good sort of lesson.
God, I want to say that's from before Chalcedon Christianity, in that like that was something that branched out of really early Christianity, and they only stopped doing it once the major branches of Christianity decided to start cracking down on it as just an arbitrary thing they didn't want to encourage people to do.
Interesting that, for example, for the first, actually, we are right to the first when light is reviled as something evil, but we actually learned that prior to that it was evident that the first was a light aligned world. When we find the ruins of the Church of the First Light, we don't actually know what the First Light is actually, but this religion is mentioned mostly in side quests, in those you find around the map. But there are quite some locations that have churches dedicated to the First Light.
Like in Fort Job.
Like in Fort Job, there's another one in Amarang. There's another one in the underwater ruins of Bovert. Yeah. So and it's this is kind of another tangent, but when Elizabeth comes and tells the people who have awakened to the echo in 5.2 what the voice is, he names it as what you heard is the voice of light itself. He doesn't mention the name Heidelin, which makes me suspect that the people of the first don't even know what Heidelin is.
They don't
It's
know
just
her
for
name,
the-
perhaps,
I agree with that.
but her reach is from all the shards for sure.
For them, the concept of light was probably bent up in the traditions of the warriors of light that they were aware of from time. That we get an interesting history lesson on at the beginning of 5.3, and that could have potentially been the origin of the church. Them essentially almost founding a religion around the concept of these saviors.
But I have to think back to Emmett's conversation after the Katana Ravel, where he's explaining that Heidelin and Zodiac are not gods of the first. And the implication I got was that even though there may have been worship of light in general on the first, Heidelin and Zodiac were never specifically deified on the first.
I agree. If we go, I mean, even if we go to the source, until Luisua came from Charlem preaching the word of Highland, not even Eorzea pledged worships actively the Mother Crystal.
Her faith seems to be always kind of like passively in the background, especially relative to Eorzea to the 12.
Yeah, except for Evilists that we know that they were worshippers of Hydaelyn.
And that's something that was questioned recently in the patch. Like, what's the true nature of her blessing? But that's another topic.
Yes.
Another topic entirely. So gone over that.
Maybe more big players in the this whole thing. I feel like that's the main one.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps we may speculate on since you guys mentioned the possibility of the void being part of the.
They disappear. Did she disappear?
I think
Tragic.
I could maybe take over if we're waiting for her to return.
Go for it.
My point was going to be that one thing we could also look at briefly is just like the Void Synth himself, while largely kind of just a mass of enemies, we do have like some of them be like Diabolos and Scathiath and the Cloud of Darkness just having personality. And it would be interesting if we ever were to go there, if we were to like meet more higher rungs of the Void Synth hierarchy and seeing how their intelligence exists, essentially, how they rule the 13th now.
I mean, there are, I believe, 13 levels of hierarchy to Void Synth.
12.
12, thank you.
The Pantheon of 12.
That said, like, we couldn't really talk to Cloud of Darkness. She wanted to eat us. So.
Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
very talkative, but
for adventurers.
if we ever do get into a circumstance where we could talk to them for 5 minutes, I think it'd be pretty interesting to learn about them.
Well, given that they're opposite the Sin Eaters, like Sin Eaters have lost all of their personality. The ego is suppressed and diminished to the point where they're creatures of instinct and they're easily controlled by the Light Wardens. Whereas and that's the effect of over aspecting to the umbral pole. The astral pole would be an over ego, like selfish, me, don't care about anything else. Like you would see vices, whatever personality traits, quirks, or issues, just magnified. That makes sense to me.
It would be interesting to see how, if we're going to go to the 13th to try and fix it, how we would potentially try to fix it, in part through fixing its denizens and introducing more light, but also perhaps more selflessness.
See, I think it's complicated to fix the 13th because unless what we know about tempering is wrong, the Void Scent that have been transformed can't be saved. All we can do is save the actual planet.
Basically, we would have to kill them and disperse their ether and hope that does something.
Is it true though? Because I mean, we don't know if we can. We haven't tried bringing a senator from who they were, but we have seen. Have you done the Scholar Quest line afterwards? Afterwards 5.0?
Level 80?
Level 80.
I have.
I'm not sure if the Tomberry state form could be considered a form of void infection, but we managed to cure Setoto from that.
Yeah,
So-
I mean the void basically for those who haven't done this quest line, there's a void sent who's responsible for the Tonberry.
Vitoso.
He's literally, this is what he did. He was invisible. Sorry for the spoilers, but it's an invisible void sent who does Tonberry to people, and because they're Lalafell, they're miniature. But if you did that to a Hur or a Ro, you just follow the core logic there.
He was
So-
engineered, synthetically engineered, specifically to wipe out and spread plague on Nim. And it was basically a bioweapon.
That's how Mhach destroyed Nim, essentially.
Yeah,
or at
they
least
threw
like one way.
Took
They
him
threw
out
a
of the
messed
war
up
at the
void
very
sent.
least.
Yep. And imagine if they had actually engineered us the same thing for Amdapor. Of course, it was not as easily managed. They actually sealed one of they sent Diabolos out of all the things they could have sent. They sent Diabolos.
No one could ever claim the Maquis as being entirely correct or sane in all of the things they did during the War of the Magi. I get the hint that they had a bit of desperation in what they did, including the fact that like they had a hand, I think, in Ozma devouring Nim as well,
Yep.
and being like, we're gonna drop a bioweapon on them, but we're also gonna go that extra mile and eat their city too.
I
It's
don't know.
like-
The Maquis were kind of extra, but considering one of their inspirational figures was Chateau to herself, yeah, I can see why.
They
think
sealed
they were desperate.
Diabolos away in the city, and then we decided to let's throw open the door and release him.
We caused Void Arc.
We did.
Mm.
We also
Well, I
cleaned
mean, it
up
was
Void Arc.
floating around. We just went and cleaned it up, really.
It was
just
those pirates.
swept the kitchen, accidentally swept it a little too hard.
Can
Back
we
on
have Dunscathed housing, please?
What was that?
Unscathed House.
Oh
That
god.
would be nice. Because
Come
it's up there doing nothing. We could actually live there.
If they're gonna do housing, though, I'd much rather have Charlene and Amarod housing.
Oh, totally. They're not
Ugh.
Lana. We're just squeeing over
Emerald
these
apartments.
floating.
Yes, please,
Victorian-
please,
That I want.
please.
But I think that for closing the void thing and voicent, perhaps we may speak of the Reaper and the implication of the
I
job.
do want to read one passage to
Before we
you.
go on
That's
I've been trying to say something, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Here we go into the Reaper, which is interesting and related to the Void and should definitely be brought up. I did want to say that the similarities between Void and Sin Eaters have always made me sort of side-eye them and look at Heidelin and look at Zodiark. I have a suspicion, we'll see if there's anything to it, that they may end up return to one entity, as it were, by the end of Endwalker. We'll see. But I wonder if we could do the same thing with Void and Sin Eaters. Find both pieces of the soul, stick it together, see if it fixes anything. I
Oh,
don't know.
I love that.
They made that as a kind of hint connection in the Encyclopedia Eorzea with the golem statues that the Endapor built and the Sin Eaters on the first.
Indeed.
Maybe.
Is under this is my little theory thrown out there. They were gifted that knowledge from a certain party, and that was in part that basically started the sixth calamity, because Amdapor were a bunch of white mages. They were built for defense, not offense. So what?
I'm a main white mage, and I can assure you that the defense, not offense, is a lie.
Okay,
Oh,
fine.
gameplay joke.
Why?
Feed the blood lily.
White
Blood
mage
for the
is
blood
so
lily.
aggro.
As a white mage video I just watched recently said white mage is the greenest of the green DPS.
Oh, it is. If you're not holy bombing
So
for
let's
9
pretend
seconds,
that
you're doing
players
it
do
wrong.
not exist and it's just NPCs, okay? Going with NPCs, going with history here. All right.
Also, Ayumi, consider Wilbert before the flood. Have you done the tank quest?
Yes, I have.
Remember how the court mage was transforming people? They were neither sin eaters nor void sent by appearance, but boy, they looked identical. The main person he transformed looked like a succubus from the void, and they seem to have the same kind of something very wrong with them, but a different appearance. It's very interesting.
Which still adds to my thing that the knowledge was gifted to them by certain parties and caused them to look very similar to those on the first.
That's what I'm trying to get at here. Sorry. I was trying to bring that up as support of your idea because that was before the flood.
It was.
They had not seen sin eaters at that point because there hadn't been a flood of light. But they already knew you could basically taint somebody's soul and get this. Well, you taint it with light, you get that. You taint it with dark, you get this. I have a headcanon, and this is probably just tinfoil, but I hope there's more to it. That if you have a soul and you split it into 14 parts, and you take one of those parts and you turn it dark, and it looks like a flying gargoyle thing, and then you take another part and you turn it light, sin eater, it'll also look like a flying gargoyle thing. Like that, the appearance is the same. The monster that comes out is the same. It's just how it looks. It's just a cool idea.
Yeah.
There could be a science to transformation. Exactly.
In the end, it's pretty much this all belongs basically to the discipline of soulcraft, and the one we know. Well, not considering the soul gift of Hades, the best mind we have on the discipline is MacLeod.
So I would like to read a passage here that I think you guys would find humorous. Prior to its discovery as an actual existing realm parallel to ours, the void was simply an imagined place that ignorant people used as a convenient answer to questions when they were unable to answer.
Nice.
Whither comes the unknown beast? The void. What causes the moons to wane? The void.
Where do babies come from? The void.
Now it's Garleans.
There's some distant element of truth in both those answers now, isn't there?
I like the idea that answer of the void is a leftover memory, maybe.
Perhaps. This was an actual passage in the Encyclopedia Eorzea, by the way.
Yeah, they're making a joke of it, but
yeah.
That reeks of Codifor.
Never let anyone tell you Charlians don't have a sense of humor.
The best jokes are based in reality. They only play if they are.
Exactly. Or at least seem plausible enough to an element of the truth.
Okay, the Encyclopedia 3 will have Garleans written down instead of void.
If there are any of them left at that point.
Oh, there'll be plenty left.
Rude.
You brought up an interesting point with the Reaper class, and I think it would be a good time to go back to that, if that's all right.
Go for it.
I don't know if she got to finish. Did you have more to say on that, Meal?
I'm not sure because my network is going crazy tonight, so I don't recall what they said about Reaper, but
Void Sent?
Yeah, Void Sent. I'm kind of intrigued because they said that they were not sure if they were going to settle. I think this was in an interview afterwards, after the fanfest, when they introduced the job. They introduced it as a Void Sent, but then they said we're not exactly settled on if it's a Void Sent or of the nature of the thing of the avatar. So it's kind of intriguing that it's kind of 5 months away, but they're not still sure about making the avatar Void Sent or something else.
Yeah, I think if they was a void sent, that would be kind of problematic.
I was going to say the same exact word.
Right. I would rather it be something else.
I think it'd be great to be a Void Sent. I want to have a little soul that got all twisted and be like, we're friends now.
See, if they like bring it up as a soul, that'd be a questionable thing in China.
There's the question: does the soul linger after you become a Void Sent or a Sin Eater? We don't know. It could be that that counts as death. Actually, this is to bring up the the quests. Here, there was something I found very interesting. During the healing quests, we find that the healer, the healer cardinal virtue. Sorry,
That's what it. Yeah.
wandering around. Is that
Suffer
Suffersine?
sign.
That's Suffersine, yeah.
Yep.
Is going and healing hurt void scent, or not void scent, hurt sin eater. So our, this dwarf looks for a healer, you, the warrior of light, and is like, okay, try healing this void scent or this sin eater re-injury, and it doesn't work. And then they describe it as being like a constructed being, like I think they described like a talus sort of thing. It's not truly alive; it's more like a construct, which is very interesting and makes me wonder where the soul goes, if anywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because we know, for example, that Mitran's soul was trapped inside Eden, but we may argue that the body itself is not alive, and the soul is no longer in control. So when they actually kind of call you or call the warrior of darkness, the one who frees the souls of the sin eaters, they're actually kind of right, because if the soul gets trapped inside the soul, inside the sin eater or the voicent, but the body is no longer theirs to control, then that would be the problem.
Yes, the body is all messed up and it's not right, and it's having
I think Giot speculates that, well, it didn't work perhaps because it was when you try to raise the thing, I think it was a scorpion of sort or something, I don't remember, or one of the flying things, and you try to cast raise or whatever on the thing and doesn't work, and Giot says something like, well, I guess I guess it didn't work because it was never alive to begin with, and it's like, yeah, probably not alive in the strict meaning of the word. It moves, it does things, but it's not even undead. It's really weird.
I believe the term they used was construct, and yes, really weird is another good term for it. It's definitely I feel like they introduced the Sin Eaters as a direct mirror to the Void Scent, and that it may become relevant soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand this construct concept, to be honest. I mean, a lot of the quests we're talking about, especially the healer role quests, she's healing Void Scent that are the souls of her brethren and friends. Like, she can recognize that those are her pals transformed. And she doesn't heal the ones that are just random scrubs she's never met. That's the gimmick of the role quest.
Yeah, but the question with Suffer Sign is she exactly healing them? It's more likely that because she's a Sin Eater too, she's restoring the activity of, if we can call the light activity, in the Sin Eaters, so that makes them move again.
Well, I'm using heal as a loose term. I don't mean cure too. I mean healing.
Yes, because it works like that. But
correct.
I mean, when you start getting into the question, that is when you see that, well, it may not be that simple as a healing. It's more like, how do you call it? When you have a wind-up toy, you have to
repairing.
Yeah, more or less. So, well, yeah. Anyway, back to the Reaper. It's. I think that maybe it's because in the future we may restore the 13th, and if we get rid of all the Void Scents, then the Reapers would be out of job.
I mean, there's still moments where you can charge through 5.x story and then go back and find, like, I haven't actually checked if you can still find Thancred and stuff in the Void or in the Empty, or if there's if it's just the girls. Now I'm curious, actually. But there are still moments where, like, Urian J's on the source handing out the ARRX primals while he's also on the first. So, like, that's not really their concern. They do assume to a degree.
Right?
They do assume to a degree you're doing the content of 50 at the 50 point, you're doing the content of 60 at the 60 point, so forth, so on. I will say also that there's enough side quests that you can always go back and do, that even if we fix the void, it's never going to be super duper perfect, so I'm not that worried about it myself.
Sure, they'll find workarounds. Although I think in the terms of Urian J and Thancred and the Eden quests, they did try to construct it as much as possible to avoid that situation, whereby they did it to, you can only do the last section of Eden after 5.3.
Indeed, and I haven't gone back and tried it the other way. I'm actually going to on a character. I just haven't had the time.
So,
but in the older times, they didn't really worry so much about that.
The thing with Reaper, as a quick note, is the other day I was watching the keynote again and watching the video for the Reaper, and because I remember how, because in game already thaumaturges and black mages deal with opening portals to the void and summoning voidsent. Even the red mage quest line has some of that.
Although it's unfortunate that the black mage player never actually gets the opportunity to do that. I say this as someone who has wanted that to be added for a long time.
Yes,
may I chime in a moment?
Yeah.
A few minutes ago, Lord Mawkish had said, I think there is some debate over whether the Void Sent are the 13th denizens, what the Sin Eaters are to the first, or has that been fully confirmed? I think it's fully confirmed, but I don't know if there's a textual confirmation. Any thoughts?
I mean, Alice specifically states that the Sin Eaters were people who were caught in the path of the flood.
Right, we're talking about the opposite side, the 13th. We have seen humans be transformed into Void Sent. We know it's possible. We've got the role quests. We've got several expansions. But do we have any text about that?
I believe it's explained. Something. I'm trying to remember if Unukalhai says it specifically.
I believe it's Unukalhai, yeah.
Is it Unukalhai? It's been so long since I've done those quests.
I want to say it's him, yeah, from my recollection.
Because he explained, he explained that he was the one who was saved when the flood of darkness came over the 13th, and it turned its denizens.
The people escaped.
I do know it was stated somewhere that the people of the first were twisted into monstrosities. It may have even said the animals as well. I can't remember precisely where, but I think that was where.
Yes.
Well, we have a vast quantity of different types of Void Sent, just like Sin Eaters. We have the eyeballs, we've got the Hawks. I mean, the list is endless.
Yeah, so the thing I was going to say about Reaper is that I was checking the glyphs and everything, and aside from a few notes that I'm not going to share here, because not the time, and perhaps I'm seeing too much into it, seems to work not exactly voice-scenty. As far as we know.
I'm looking forward to more information about it.
As it gets closer, oh yeah, we'll definitely get the launch trailer and all that good stuff. We'll hear you scream again.
I want to see us break into Charlane's secret vaults and see all their body secrets.
Invisibility cloak.
I want to know among those what they know about the void too.
Super do as well. And just to ruin everyone's fun, a reminder, about half the scenes in the Shadowbringers trailer were off screen or in the past, so depression.
I'm fairly certain what we see going on in Thavnir and in Charlane are going to be off-screen events.
Well, that pretty much covers today's topic on the 13th, and Silva, Sayela, Unkalai, and the role quests. I think we covered pretty much everything that happened with what it started with, the individuals involved, the end result, as well as a few other thoughts. Anyone else have anything to add before we close out?
really hope we get to see more of Ayala.
Yeah, next week topic. Do you want us to pull up a poll, or are we planning something?
I believe we're planning to do 5.55.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out. It was great to have you. I love to see in the comments questions.
Yeah, thank you for joining
Thank
our
you all.
inaugural restream event with both services running, Twitch and YouTube at the same time, and we will see you next week.
Yes. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.